How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Creative Collision Podcast. This is Saeed here. On this episode, I'm going to do a couple album reviews, and I'm also going to start a new series, a classic album review. So it's going to be a heavy album review podcast. I'm actually doing 3 different albums. Haven't done one of these in a while. I believe the last album I reviewed was Royce da 5'9's album. But yeah, I think that was the last album. So that was a while back already. That was, before coronavirus, before quarantine. That I think that was like February. There hasn't been a lot of hip hop albums that I've been that interested in over the last couple months since the quarantine started. So, but 2 albums did just come out that I was looking forward to, and that's the new Run the Jewels album came out, Run the Jewels 4, the super group of LP and Killer Mike. So I'm gonna review that album, and I'm also gonna review the new Freddie Gibbs album, Alfredo, with Alchemist producing the album. So I'm gonna review those 2 albums. Not spend too much time on it, but enough to talk about my thoughts and how I feel about those albums. I don't do many album reviews, so it's still something I'm getting used to, but it's something I want to do more often. And then, like I mentioned, the new series I'm starting is classic album reviews. Something I thought about before in the past, just giving it a shot now, trying new ideas, and a couple months back when the quarantine started back in March, I did album rankings, which I enjoyed doing, and I still might do it for other artists, but I did album rankings for a couple of my favorite artists. I did it for Jay-Z, Nas, and Kanye West. So I like doing that. I obviously like talking hip hop, and I want to do a classic album review. So and I think it's only right to, if I want to start a classic album review series, it's only right to start off with in my opinion, still probably the greatest hip hop album of all time, Illmatic by Nas. And I was debating of doing this on a separate podcast, but I'm gonna put it together in this with this episode with the other 2 album reviews I'm doing. So and then something that I'm briefly gonna talk about at the end, just because it just happened and it's just fresh on my mind. I just watched the new Dave Chappelle special that he had on YouTube, 846. Just it was so emotional for me to watch, and so real and authentic. And I love Dave Chappelle, man. He's my favorite comedian of all time. So since I just watched that, I wasn't planning on talking about it. It wasn't part of my rundown, but I just want to give my brief thoughts about that at the end here as well. So yeah, let's start it off. I'll start off my first album review. I'll start it off with the Run the Jewels 4. For those that don't know, Run the Jewels is a super group of Killer Mike and LP, two legendary hip hop artists. Now, Killer Mike is over the last few years, Killer Mike has become more popular among the mainstream hip hop fans, and just in general, he's become more of a popular figure. He's, especially recently, over these last couple of weeks with the protesting and everything going on in the wake of George Floyd's murder. He's been one of the most outspoken hip hop artists over the last decade now, pretty much his whole career, but especially since 2012 when he dropped Rap Music, his solo album. So he's been doing a lot of interviews lately. He had that trending that interview of him trending it was like the first day the protesting started, and as some of the rioting started. He had that video at it was like a news press conference or something like that, where he was, talking about Atlanta and the state of its people and the city, and he gave like an emotional, heartfelt speech, and that was trending. That got people's eyes to look at Killer Mike. My girlfriend, who never even heard of Killer Mike, saw him for the first time in that video, so it put eyes on him, which is nice, because Killer Mike's definitely somebody that deserves to be heard, and is one of the smartest, most educated, and one of the dopest, just simply one of the best MCs out there. He's been doing it for a long time, and over the last couple of years, he's been definitely in the news more, and in the spotlight more. He has a Netflix show now. He was doing interviews on First Take with Stephen A. Smith, and no, it wasn't First Take. He might have been on First Take too, but he was on. I watched him on Undisputed with Skip and Shannon. So yeah, Killer Mike, and then LP, who was an underground legend in the hip hop world. It's been doing this since the early '90s with Company Flow. So these two came together in 2013 to make their first album, Run the Jewels, and start this off. And they've been on this tear ever since. It had been 4 years since the last Run the Jewels album, and just my first thoughts on it. I mean, it's all these albums have been great. This fourth installment here I think I have to think about it a little bit more, but it's right up there, man. It might be the best one yet, especially in these times, because their last Run the Jewels albums, they've had those political messages and social commentary, but this album, I feel like, was so much more aggressive with it. And the previous Run the Jewels albums, that they mixed in kind of just braggadocio rhymes and like being clever and funny along with their social commentary. You got like a nice mix, and they made those albums really, really great and really enjoyable. But this album was, I felt like, a lot more straightforward, and this is the message. This is the message we're delivering. This is the statements we're making. It was much more in your face, much more, we're coming at you with it. Starting off with Yankee and the Brave, which was just a dope concept on that intro of, Yankee, the New York Yankees, LP's the Yankee, he's from New York, and the Brave, play on words, the Atlanta Braves, what Killer Mike being the Brave, being from Atlanta, and just it was it was a dope little, it was just a dope story of a situation with the police that Killer Mike finds himself in, and he'd rather, it's it's something to think about. Like, he'd rather kill himself than get killed by the police, because even if he did kill himself, or even if the police did, I think he said that even if the police did kill him, they would still blame it on, he killed himself, so he'd rather go out on his own terms. But then LP kind of come to his defense and rescue while Killer Mike is away. So really dope concept. All the songs are amazing. They keep getting better and better. Like, their chemistry has always been on point from the beginning, but their chemistry has continued to get better, and they're just so much on the same page. I mean, so much of this album is just makes you think, and makes you really look at the situation we're in today. And it's just crazy to see that, these lyrics on this album sounds like they were just recorded yesterday. Like they saw everything happening here and we decided to record this album. But I think this album was recorded, if I'm not mistaken, I heard it was or I read somewhere that it was recorded back in November. And you have these bars, especially by Killer Mike, about police brutality, that and he can't breathe. And one of the songs that come to mind immediately is a "Walking in the Snow" song, where let me pull up the lyrics here, where Killer Mike just he just takes a shot at obviously taking a shot at the system and police brutality, but it just sounds so relevant to what just happened to George Floyd. Talking about, he starts off, they promise education, but really they give you tests and scores, and they predict in prison population about who scores the lowest. Just the systematic racism there, and usually the lowest scores the poorest, and they look like me. They look like how big black dude, that frighten normal folk, right? And every day on the evening news, they feed you fear for free, and you so numb you watch the cops choke out a man like me, because he looks like Killer Mike has the same look and kind of build as some of these black people that went down by police brutality, like Michael Brown was a big guy, Eric Garner, so you watch the cops choke out a man like me, and until my voice goes from a shriek to a whisper, I can't breathe. And you just sit there on your couch and watch it on TV. The most you give is a Twitter rant and call it a tragedy. But truly the travesty, you've been robbed of your empathy, replaced with apathy. I wish you can magically. And it's just so hitting, man. It's so damn poignant and so damn relevant to what's going on right now. And these bars were recorded last year, so it wasn't. I mean, it seems like he just made this. That's how on top of it, on top of this, Killer Mike was, so I think because of what they're saying and the impact of what they're saying, LP has a lot of great bars as well about, coming from himself as a white guy, still still understanding how fucked up the world is, or the country is right now, and the situations we're in. So I mean, their partnership's amazing, and it's nothing bad to say about the album. I think when I first ran through it the first time, the one thing, it didn't quite grab me right away, and I think the reason why is because some of the hooks on the album are not as good as previous Run the Jewels albums, because when you first hear an album, you're obviously trying to follow along with the lyrics, and you're hearing the beat, and you're hearing things that are easily accessible at first, right? So the beat, the hook, things like that is the things you catch right away, and what you pick out of a song if you enjoy it or not. And then, especially with guys as lyrical as these two are, the lyrics, you have to read into them more. You're not going to catch every reference, every bar on the first listen. You're not going to catch everything, right? So when I first heard it, obviously I knew what they were saying was dope, and I caught a lot of what they were saying, but it didn't quite grab me right away because of some of the hooks that they weren't really didn't really get me like that, not like on previous Run the Jewels albums where I just first listened and I was just like, man, the whole thing was just banging out. But then after 2 or 3, I've heard this album now about 4 or 5 times, so after the third listen, and I started reading into the lyrics, I was like, catching everything. I was like, man, this is something else. This is right there with their other albums for sure. And I might have to rank this as the best Run the Jewels album yet. I think Run the Jewels 2 and 3 are probably a little bit easier to listen to, where you can throw it on a party. Those beats with the beats and like some of the hooks, and then just the way they're rapping, and it's just they got a lot of dope funny lines that you can play anywhere, that people will get. But this album just hits a lot harder, and is, I think, much more impactful. And I think in the long run, this album will be the album that in their series so far that people are gonna look back at and see as their best one yet. Yeah, I mean, don't know what much else to add to it. If I were to give it a rating, I'd probably give it maybe like a 9.5 out of 10. It's really special. Out of Sight. Two Chainz was great. 2 Chainz was great on here. He's been killing his features. Ooh La La, DJ Premier scratches. That was dope. Dope concepts. Zach De La Rocha was on this album again. He's been on the last couple of Run the Jewels albums, and he's always great. I hope they keep on going. I hope they keep making albums, and they're doing their thing. Definitely an album I'm gonna have a rotation for a while, and probably the best album so far this year. I would say, the best album of 2020 so far. So Run the Jewels 4, great album. That's my review for it, and let's move on to Alfredo, the Freddie Gibbs review. So with Alfredo, little backstory, well, not backstory, but little refresher on Freddie Gibbs. Freddie Gibbs has done these this run of producer, rapper, these albums were one exclusive producer, right? He has the 2 albums with Madlib, Bandana and Pinata. And then I think Fetty was produced entirely by Alchemist as well. Let me double check that. So he's been doing these albums with just one producer for a while now, and it's a recipe that he just doesn't miss, and it keeps working for him. So I don't see why he would stop. Alfredo runs right in the line of that series for Freddie Gibbs. Freddie Gibbs, Alfredo. After first listen, my initial thoughts were really good, not as good as Bandana and Pinata. That was my first initial reaction, and after a couple more listens, that's still my my thinking, or my what I'm coming out with after a few more listens. It's not, I mean, there's nothing bad about the album at all. I actually like every song. I think is really, really good. I think it's consistently good through the whole way through. I just think the highs on Bandana, which came out last year, are a little better, a little higher. The highs are higher on Pinata and Bandana, which is the reason why I have Alfredo just underneath those. There's nothing. I also just think, as good as Alchemist is too, Alchemist is great. Madlib's just a little better to me. so I think that's mainly the main reason why I prefer Bandana and Pinata over Alfredo. But nonetheless, it's still a great album. It still has a lot of great moments. The features were great on here. Tyler the Creator came through with a great feature. Rick Ross was really good on here. So like the features really were good. The Griselda features, the Benny the Butcher, and I think he had all 3 of the Griselda. No, I think he just had Benny and Conway. Actually, I really like Conway's verse on "Babies and Fools." Scotty Beam was a song with with Rick Ross, and that production just perfectly suits Rick Ross. Uh, so yeah, it has those it's really consistent, really quick listen, only 10 songs, 35 minutes. So I think that makes the album better, makes it more enjoyable. Um, has just has like a nice smooth it plays so easy. You just get through it and it's plays so easy. It transitions so well. Um, but yeah, again, not up to me, not quite as good as Bandana and Pinata, or even Fetty. I think it's right up there with those though. But that's not saying that's definitely not saying it's bad, because those are high highs. I think Pinata is a classic. I think Bandana is got pretty close to Pinata. Fetty's also just really good. So I mean, all those albums are like, you know, 9 out of 10s basically. 8.5 out of 10 is 9 out of 10. So I mean, I got Alfredo probably like a solid 8 out of 10, and so that's really good still. Um, but yeah, it's I don't gonna spend too much more time on it. Honestly, it's just kind of my quick thoughts about it. Freddie Gibbs has become, over the last couple of years, has become one of my more favorite rappers, and anytime he's releasing an album, I'm kind of I'm I'm looking forward to it, because he hardly ever misses as well. He's always on top of his game. He's really consistent. So he never misses. Uh, yeah, Fetty was with the Alchemist and Currency, and Currency is also one of my favorite rappers. Anytime he drops something, Currency is really consistent as well, where he rarely ever misses. And Freddie has become one of the most underrated rappers in the game. He's got a really consistent discography, and he just keeps doing his thing. It's hard to miss when you're working with producers like Madlib and Alchemist, and you're always gonna have great production. And I wish rappers did that more often, to be honest. I wish rappers would just hook up with just like one producer and make exclusive albums with them, because it doesn't matter who you are, really. You're always gonna have better chemistry that way. You're rarely ever gonna miss. Just going back to Run the Jewels, like, obviously it's a group where LP makes all the beats, right? And he raps for himself. He raps and makes beats for himself, and Killer Mike, as well, with just two people working together all the time, and they never miss. And Freddie just doesn't miss when he's working with one producer. And it's a recipe that I feel is really successful, has a high success rate. And just in general, when I think about it, I think about like Jay-Z's 444. One album, or was one producer, an album with only one producer, no ID. Or when it's really a high success rate when that happens. Madlib, of course, with MF Doom, Mad Villainy. I think about like Common with Kanye on B. Those exclusive producers really work out well, because I just think the chemistry's there. Obviously you gotta have a great producer. All these producers I've talked about are like all-time great, so it's that helps too. But yeah, Freddie Gibbs, Alfredo, great album. I'll give like a solid like 8 out of 10. It's right up there amongst the best albums of the year so far. there hasn't been a lot of great albums I've heard this year so far. I like it better than A Written Testimony by Jay Electronica, even though that album I think also is more relevant now with what's going on. When that album came out, I actually think that was the last album I reviewed. Honestly, yeah, that was the last album I reviewed because that came out after Royce da 5'9"'s album. So Royce da 5'9"'s up there as well, his album. But Alfredo, great album. Freddie Gibbs just doesn't miss with these exclusive albums. He just keeps making dope albums with one producer and really good. Not quite on the level of Bandana, but nonetheless, I think that's more so has to do with Madlib just being a little bit of a better producer than Alchemist than Freddie's rapping. I think Freddie's rapping is just as good on here as it was in Bandana. I just think Madlib's a little better, and that's the difference. That's what sets it apart. The highs on Bandana are just better. Like the first time I heard of Palm Olive, just like blew me away. The first time I heard Crime Pays just kind of hit me more than the first time I heard Alfredo and the songs on Alfredo. So nonetheless, still great job by Freddie, and I'm looking forward to. I hope he keeps doing this. I actually don't see why he wouldn't. I'm looking forward to these exclusive albums with one producer, and I hope he keeps doing it. So yeah, shout out to Freddie Gibbs. All right, so now let's get to the classic album review portion of the podcast. And very first time doing this. And I just feel, I know this album's been talked about a lot, but I think you got to start with the best there is, So my first classic album review is going to be none other than Illmatic by Nasir Jones. Basically the golden standard of hip hop albums to this day, still Illmatic. And these classic album reviews, I'm not going to do like a track by track breakdown, because obviously we know that all the songs are great because that's what makes it a classic. You can't really have a subpar song or a really bad song. So I'm not going to do like a track by track breakdown, but the way I'm going to handle these classic album reviews, I'm going to do more of a impact, like talk about the impact of an album that the album made. Talk about the impact the songs had on hip hop. So that's how I'm gonna approach it. Just like the influence the album had and what made it so special. So let's get into it. Illmatic is one of my all-time favorite albums. I probably listen to, maybe I listen to Reasonable Doubt more, maybe, but honestly, I think Illmatic might be, if it's not the most listened to album I've ever played, then it's number two. I think Illmatic and Reasonable Doubt are probably the two most albums I played the most in my life. So it's looking back at it, obviously I was only 3 years old when this album came out, but that shows how great this album is and how impactful it is that someone like me who wasn't around for when this album came out, and being from a totally different life, totally different part of the world, part of the country, growing up in California compared to this this album that's like so New York, right? So mid-90s Queensbridge, New York City, but still relating to it and the experiences of this album and loving it, for what it is. And even people younger than me, I go on Twitter, on hip hop Twitter, and I see people talking about Illmatic, and these are kids that are probably weren't even born. I was only 3, but these are probably kids that were born like in the year 2000 who still go back and listen to Illmatic and appreciate it and still recognize it as like the greatest, one of the greatest albums of all time, you know. That's why the influence is what it is, the impact is what it is. It transcends generations. What made it so special was the fact that Nas was so young when he made this, man. And you think about, he wrote this album, or at least a bulk of this album he wrote when he was only 19 years old. And just thinking about how young you are at 19 still, you know. I'm 29 and I have, I have no idea how a 19-year-old could write something like this. His life experiences and his mind was so advanced for a 19-year-old and just so ahead of the game, that it's just mind-blowing. You hear 19-year-old rappers nowadays and they're not talking about anything. You're just seeing a bunch of bullshit. And you have this kid who writes some of the greatest verses of all time and some of the most intricate and complex verses of all time, and some of the greatest stories of all time. New York State of Mind, One Love, some of the most vivid storytelling in hip hop history. Nas is one of the greatest storytellers of all time. I think that's actually his greatest asset. His greatest skill is storytelling. He's, the way he can vividly paint these pictures of New York life in 1994 on Illmatic is what makes his album the greatest album ever made. Still, it's on top of that, of course, the production and having this crew of all-time great producers working on it with DJ Premier and P-Rock and Q-Tip and who else is on it? Damn, I know I'm missing somebody, but nonetheless, it's Large Professor. That's another one. Nonetheless, they're like all the greatest hip hop producers in New York at that time. Had a beat on this album, and that was the first time that ever happened. So that's another reason why it's a classic and it's so impactful. It was the first album to feature multiple different producers on one project. It's top to bottom perfect. Only 10 tracks, only one guest verse from AZ, which is one of the greatest guest verses of all time. And just the amazing storytelling, amazing writing, amazing lyrics, amazing production. The reason I played this so much is just because I was so blown away by the way this dude was rapping. I never heard anybody rap like that before. I remember buying this album. I was like, I had to be like 17 years old when I bought this album at the store. This is the first, money that I had, I wasn't, borrowed or, wasn't from my parents. It was like my own money. And this is like 2000, mid 2000s. So this is like where all this, club party songs are popping on the radio. And here I am, like, as a 17-year-old kid going to the store and buying Illmatic instead of like some club shit that probably everybody else my age was buying, right? And I didn't even understand it at first, which is a funny thing. I didn't get I didn't really get the verses or what he was talking about until later, but I knew what he was saying was so dope because of the way he was saying it, his flow and his rhyme patterns. I never heard anything like it, and once I did, like, actually start to get what he was talking about, what he was saying, that's when it was like, blew me away even more. So yeah, Illmatic, greatest album of all time, greatest hip hop album of all time, still to this day, for various reasons. One, the music is amazing. The music's classic. It's it can still play today. It doesn't sound. I mean, it sounds like it was made in the mid '90s, but it doesn't sound like it's like, obviously it doesn't. It aged very well because of how good Nas was, because of the lyricism, lyrics like that, bars like that, wordplay like that, storytelling like that will never sound old. Doesn't matter if the actual song sounds like it was made in a certain era. It transcends time. That's the reason. That's one of the reasons it's a classic album. The production, having multiple producers, is another reason. And then the impact on generations after it is another reason. It's might be one. I mean, it's definitely one of the most influential albums of all time. Might be the most influential album of all time. It basically, everybody that came after, everything that came after it had to match it. It took lyricism to a whole new level, and really set off. That album cover, I mean, it's classic with the young Nas on there. That's been duplicated, like Lil Wayne's comes to mind on the Carter 3s, kind of like paying homage to Illmatic a little bit, yeah, one of my favorite albums of all time. Just wanted to talk about how important it was and what made it a classic album. So that's my classic album review. I know it's kind of short, but first time doing this, so if I keep doing this, I'm gonna have more of a breakdown and more of a structure to it. But just giving it a shot with this one and starting off with Illmatic as my classic album review. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about on this podcast is the latest Dave Chappelle. I don't even call it a stand-up, but the latest special. It wasn't really a stand-up. Yeah, Dave Chappelle just released a special on YouTube's Netflix, on Netflix and YouTube, called 8:46, which is the time that the police officer, or now former police officer, had his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and coincidentally was the same time that Chappelle was born. He was born at 8:46 a.m. So really, really, really crazy to think about. It was more of just a conversation, just to talk about my thoughts on it real quick. And it was special, man. I was teary-eyed watching it the whole time. It really hit home. It really summed up how I feel, in a way that I couldn't express it the way Chappelle can. And I think that's what makes him so special, is Chappelle always talks how I generally feel about things, but I'm nowhere near as smart as he is to put it, together in words the way he can, and to think about a situation he can. But I totally agree with everything he said, and everything everything he talked about, and how he related things. And that's something that makes him special. The fact that when we need a laugh, he can provide us a laugh. But what makes him so special, and his comedy so special, is he makes you think. He makes you have a new perspective on things. He makes you come out learning something new every time you watch him. Every time you watch Chappelle and you hear him talk, you feel like you learn something new, and he educates you in the same way he's relatable, or he makes you, he helps you relate to things, and of course at the same time he's funny. Yeah. This this special wasn't so funny at all, even though he did have a few jokes, but it was very from the heart, just speaking truth, and you can tell the pain in his voice about a lot of things that's been going on. The way he related the way he related the protesters and the rioting happening to how cops were when what's his name, Chris Donner. Did I get his name right? I'm gonna make sure I get his name right. The road cop. I remember this, a few years back when, he went out and went on a killing spree, killing other cops, and how Dave Chappelle said that when that happened, 400 cops showed up at Chris Dorner, that's one. Didn't want to butcher his name, but I remember that when that happened a few years back, and how 400 cops showed up at his house in Big Bear and basically Swiss sheathed him. Just weren't trying to arrest him. Just basically, killed this dude. Shot him like hundreds of times. Shot him the way Hitler got shot in Inglourious Bastards. Just kill this guy, right? And the way how he can relate that, it's like when one of their own died, right? When Chris Dorner was out there killing cops, like how the cops reacted. They send the mob, at him to track him down and find him and kill him. And how can you, expect people to be acting cool now, when one of our, I don't want to say our own, but because I'm not, I'm not black, but when, a black person, one of, the black community's own, George Floyd, one of their own get killed the way he did, for the world to see with a knee on his neck, while he's crying out for his dead mother, knowing he's going to die. How do you expect people to react, And especially when it's not like this is the first time this happened, especially when it's been multiple times, years and years of this, going back to Trayvon Martin and Eric Garner, Michael Brown, all these stats, right? I know there's others, of course, but but that's what's sad, that it's hard to keep track of how many of these situations keep happening. So how do you expect people to react? And just the way he related that to how cops react when one of their own get killed, and for people that still don't get, well, why are these people acting this way? He breaks it down in such a kind of a simple but yet thought-provoking way that just is always so sharp. He's always so on top of things, and that's what makes him, I think, the greatest comedian ever. Just the way he's able to make you think about a situation in a certain way and relate things to other situations, and come out in such a smart way, the way he does. And it was emotional watching it. It was great. It's honestly, I think, might be the greatest moment of his career, and that's saying a lot for a person that has had the career that Dave Chappelle's had. And this might be like the biggest, most impactful and greatest moment he's had. I think this special is gonna be remembered a long time, and it's gonna have a lasting legacy because of the situation we're in. And with LeBron James talking about Laura Ingraham and how she told LeBron James to shut up and dribble, and when LeBron James is the best in the world at something, you're telling this Laura Ingram's not the best at anything, and who are you to tell LeBron James to shut up and dribble? And he didn't mention this, but it might have happened after this already. But I wonder what his thoughts would have been on her saying, Drew Brees can have an opinion. Like, okay, he's an athlete too. Drew Brees can have his own opinion, but LeBron couldn't, you know. Yeah, you know, that and then Kobe, bringing up Kobe's death, and how that was on the same day he won a Grammy, and he didn't go to the Grammys. He was just sitting crying, and Kobe, you know, Kobe's numbers 824, or Chappelle's birthday as well. It's just crazy how all this, how things happen, you know. And yeah, I just want to give my quick thoughts on that. I'm kind of struggling to find the words to him already. Voice a little heavy. It's been a tough time, and we definitely needed those words, and we needed Dave Chappelle's voice, you know. He's just somebody I always look up to when he's speaking, and he's special, man. He's very special. So yeah, Dave Chappelle, great special. Loved every minute of it. I was so captivated by it, so moved by it. And yeah, you know, I just relate to what he always has to say. You know, I'm not black, but I am a minority, and I am, you know, I'm Middle Eastern and Mexican. You know, I grew up in the post 9/11 era with, you know, terrorist jokes and things like that, and you know, I have a lot of, you know, I grew up in a community that was very diverse, so I have a lot of friends from all different types of races, and I just always relate to what Chappelle has to say, you know. Yeah, he's the best. He's the best ever. I'm just gonna leave it at that. You know, don't have much else to add. Actually, one last thing about the Dave Chappelle special was when he talked about the military and how these police officers, Chris Dorner being one of them, I forgot the other person's name, but how the police officers that ended up killing their own were former military, and the way he put that together for those people that say things about how, you know, Kaepernick kneeling is disrespecting the flag and the military, and you know, these are their own, you know, military men and black men in the military that they're supposed to be taken care of, you know, and they join the military. You know, a lot of them join the military thinking that they are going to be taken care of. They were supposed to be taken care of, and then when they get out and they see how the system still is a system, you know, how like Chris Dorner, you know, not to defend his actions and what he did, but the fact that, you know, he got fired for basically filing a complaint against his white female coworker, police officer, and it still shows how you know, even after, even if you are military, you're still, you know, it's still the same thing, you know. And I just love how Chappelle put that together in the show and the special, and how, you know, he says how they, you know, it didn't matter that they were military, didn't matter that they were police officers, they were still black, and you know, they still got treated the way they did, and they still died, right? Yeah, I just want to, you know, throw that in real quick before I leave you guys. So I'll leave it at that. Just want to talk about that briefly there, with another point in the special. And yeah, I'll let you guys go. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Take care of yourself. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.